In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, it is part 2. The first episode we did Leaf's biggest risers, and then this episode we're going to talk about who is falling. So stay tuned to hear Leaf's thoughts on which prospects have been underwhelming so far this season. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. And in this case, it might be your second listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, along with my co-host, the man that watches more college basketball than anyone else, Leif Thulin. And this is going to be a very fun episode. But before we get into it, I want to let you know that you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment on this episode. It is the best way to help us grow this channel. And the NBA Big Board crew is your daily source for NBA draft content. And also, check out the Locked On newsletter. Go to lockedondaily.com. Your favorite Locked On NBA team podcast now has a newsletter, and it will be delivered right to your inbox. All right, Leif. The first episode, we talked about the guys that are rising or maybe have exceeded your expectations so far. Now we got to get into the guys who have disappointed or you believe are falling, whether this is your personal draft board, your personal opinion, or in the eyes of NBA scouts. Who's the first person that comes to mind when you think of a prospect that has not lived up to the hype?
VJ Edgecombe, and it's undeniable. And I was on record talking with you this summer about saying I had my skepticism about his ability to shoot the ball. And then, yeah, he was great in the Bahamas, but I didn't like what I saw in high school. And typically, if you're a top 5 pick in high school, you can't blend in. That's my philosophy. You cannot blend in. And he was not even noticeable against Montverde. Granted, Montverde had an all-time team, but you should still be able to notice, like, holy cow, that guy's a beast. Ironically enough, Robert Wright, another freshman at Baylor, the less touted one, he's been excellent. I don't know if he's an NBA draft prospect, but, like, I notice him every game. I'm not even saying this to be derisive, but I watched part of the Baylor-UConn game while I was watching a different game, and I was like, haven't noticed Edgecombe today, and then I realized he wasn't playing. But and the reason I bring that up is not to say that like I wasn't paying great attention. It was to say that typically when he plays, I don't notice him making a positive impact. I noticed the shot doesn't look good. He makes one or two like, holy cow, that's an amazing rebound. But I don't think we should even evaluate him as like a guard right now, particularly not a scoring guard. Like I think of him as a 3-and-D that happens to be 6'3". Like I don't buy the people that say 6'5". Like I don't think he's that big, and I don't think he's that good with the ball in his hands, and he certainly can't shoot. So I'm pretty darn low on Edgecombe, and I came in lower than just about anyone I know, and Rafael could verify that on Edgecombe coming into the season.
Yeah, I mean, I had him top 5. I remember speaking to a scout, and he thought Edgecombe was one of the safer prospects. He thought Flag and Edgecombe as far as just being safe. Then I started to hear, like right before the season started, that he wasn't the best prospect in the conference. And there were some people that started to shift towards Trey Johnson. Scouts just kind of went on their practice tour, and they would like go visit Baylor, they'd visit Texas, and so on. And what's funny is you mentioned that you watched the game yesterday and you thought like he wasn't doing anything. I thought you were going to say it looked very similar to the Gonzaga game and the Arkansas game where he was out there and you really didn't see anything. Now, I will say the Tennessee game, he showed flashes, but I've talked about it before. They were down by like 25 by the time he really got going. I think that defensively he has something. I mean, the defensive numbers that he's putting up, even if he is 6'5", are pretty impressive at 1.5 blocks per game and 2.5 steals. I do think the height is going to be interesting because wasn't he measured at like 6'3" at the Hoop Summit, and then it changed to like 6'5" the next day or something like that? I missed it. I was actually traveling when the information came out, and then by the time I got there, it had changed. But I remember hearing like the whole, chatter about the discrepancies in his height. He is averaging 11 points, 5 rebounds per game, 3 assists. You'll take the connective passing at 3 assists. He rebounds. The athleticism has definitely been on full display. At one point, I heard people saying maybe he can be like a Victor Oladipo type. I don't see the ball handling. I don't see the creativity off the dribble. I don't see it. I see, like you said, maybe a 3-and-D connective passer. I don't know if I'm taking that top 5. The height is concerning. And I don't know. I mean, hopefully he turns it around, but he would top my list as a player that is the biggest faller on my draft board.
I'm not sure I'd take him top 20. I'm not saying that to be reactionary either.
Yeah.
But you look at this draft, there's a lot of good players. And even if you look at people in similar size frames to him, even if you count him as 6'5", which I like I mentioned, I think he's 6'3", you look at a big board, and I'll just look at Tankathon, for instance, and you look at 10 through 20. You got Colin Murray Boyles, I think that's too high for him. Derek Queen, Will Riley, Asa Newell, Drake Powell, Kaspers Yakachonis, Saroff, Flan, McNeely, Hugo Gonzalez, Ian Jackson. Like, there's all those guys to me are bigger, and other than Flan, they're all bigger than he is. And Ian Jackson's similar build, but they're all bigger and far more skilled shooting the basketball, except for the true bigs in that. Like Asa Newell's a 4 or 5, and he's shooting 17% from 3. I'm fully aware, but for what he's asked to do, he's been more functional. So I just don't see a reason in a draft that I deem to be really good to take a flyer on someone who had such success and rave reviews in one event, but has blended in high school games, and he's been a non-factor in games. And so much so that, like, that's what I was saying. When I watched the game, I didn't notice him. And then I looked at the box score later, and I was like, oh, he didn't actually play. Like, but I wasn't like keenly aware that a top prospect was missing. And that's alarming. Whereas, can you imagine if Duke was playing Cooper Flagg wasn't noticeable? Like, that would be appalling. Cooper Flagg is on the floor every play. He's diving for loose balls. He's sweating so much he's losing weight and cramping like Banchero did. And he's doing all those things. Like Malalac, you could make an argument should be on this list too, because he's being outplayed by Malik Brown. But I think that's more a testament to how good Malik Brown is defensively and at 22 years old than it is something to disgrace the prospects of Colin Malalac.
Yeah, speaking of Duke, let's talk about Kon Knueppel. Now, you were high on Knueppel coming into the season, and I'll admit I fell into the Kon Knueppel trap. But everything that I was hearing about him from Duke practices it kind of turned me into somewhat of a believer. I mean, like, even some of the most reliable sources were telling me, like, this kid is really putting on a show in practices. He's going to be Duke's leading scorer, yada, yada, yada. The lights came on, and Flagg is leading Duke in scoring. He's leading the team in every statistical category, except obviously like 3-point shooting. And then Malik Brown passed him up for steals per game. But Knueppel's averaging 12 points, 3.9 rebounds, 3.3 assists. He was getting a lot of top 10 buzz. I think somebody had him at like number 6. I believe I had him at number 8. And when I do my big board 2.0, unless he has some monster performances between now and then, he's not in my lottery. The shooting has been not as good as advertised. He's shooting 35% from the floor. He has been a good passer. I will say he's probably Duke's best connective passer in a sense as far as finding Flagg on the roll man. But the shooting, the inability to like get shots. I mean, he only got off 3 shots last night against Auburn.
So that's my big thing, and I want to revisit something we talked about a while ago when talking about Duke and who their prospects were. You asked me who I thought other than Flagg had the highest potential, and I said, oh, Malach is probably the next guy picked, even with all this fire about Kon. The next guy I think has more potential is Isaiah Evans. I just don't know if he'll get chances because when there's smoke, there's a fire. This Kon guy's getting all the buzz in the world. He's going to start and he's going to score. So all those things have happened, except for the scoring prowess. So I think it still could happen. But the reason he's dropping is not because of the numbers. I think he's an excellent shooter. Like, you watch him shoot the ball, it's really good. My concern is the inability to get shots. And I think it's because Auburn, for instance, they top locked him. For those of you listening, top locking is denying by staying on the top side further away from the basket than the player you're guarding. So you're not in between the basket and the ball, and to keep him from coming off of pin downs and enabling him to hit the slip guy, but just taking the ball out of his hands, making him work really hard to get any shots. But that shouldn't take a top 10 prospect out of a game. And that's why he's lower for me. I think Kon Knueppel, he gets sped up. You put him against an athlete in KJ Lewis. He hit 2 threes that were big in the Arizona game, but I felt like he's very determined to play off 2 feet, which I admire. Like the Villanova jump stop, it's great, but he's not able to beat teams that fly out to his shooting. He commands a lot of attention, right? He's not able to beat them attacking the closeout, even with the advantage of being a 50% shooter or expected to be one. So, like, he's supposed to make all these open threes. Duke's getting him good looks. He pump fakes. He should get a layup. And instead, he's having to settle, pump fake, hang on a pivot, shoot turnaround jump shots, use his big, broad shoulders and barge into people, create that space. And he's just not gaining an edge. And if you can't gain an edge playing with a team like Duke, where they get you really good chances already, and then not to mention he's not making a lot of those shots, I fully believe he'll make shots. I think as the Duke guard play gets better, meaning Caleb Foster, Sion James, and Tyrese Proctor, they find out who's doing what more. Maybe Evans plays more, takes some onus off of Kon from scoring the ball and shooting wise, because Duke's just not shooting great right now. That's really great for him, but I just don't think on an individual level his talent is high enough to be worthy of drafting in the top 10, because I just don't think he gains advantages with what he does with the ball, and he's able to be schemed out on a team that already has the number 1 pick in the draft.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. Up next, we're going to dig a little bit deeper in Kon Knueppel. I want to share my thoughts on him, and then we're going to talk about Nolan Traore and Tyon Grant Foster. All right, let's talk about our new sponsor, Chime. And we all know what it's like around the holidays when you spend too much money and your finances take a hit. Have you ever had to borrow money from your savings, or you added a lot more debt than you planned to due to holiday expenses, whether it's traveling or buying gifts for your loved ones, your kids, or even yourself? It usually takes a pretty significant amount of time to recover from your holiday spending. We've all been there and spending more than we should during the holidays. Well, now you can take control of your finances by using Chime. Chime is a checking account with features like no monthly maintenance or low fees. You have fee-free overdrafts up to $200, and you can get paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit. So check it out at chime.com. The good thing about Chime is it helps with fee-free overdraft up to $200. Your next deposit is applied to your balance. You can get spotted on debit card purchases and cash withdrawals. There are no monthly fees or maintenance fees, and they have over 50,000 free ATMs. So set up your direct deposit in your Chime account. After qualifying for direct deposit of $200, Chime will notify you to enroll in SpotMe. So enjoy your holidays and keep your financial goals on track with Chime. Open your account in 2 minutes at chime.com/NBA. That is chime.com/NBA. And the banking service and debit card provided by Bancorp Bank NA or Stride Bank NA, members FDIC. SpotMe eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Direct deposit timing depends on submission of payment file. Boosts are available to eligible Chime members enrolled in SpotMe and are subject to monthly limit fees. Fees apply at out-of-network ATMs and OTC withdrawals. All right, second segment. So with Knueppel, like I said, I fell for the hype. I mean, it's still early. The season is only a month old and some change, but he's really struggled against Duke's top opponents. So you look at the Kentucky game, 5 for 20 from the floor. Arizona, 4 of 11. Kansas, 4 for 14. Auburn, it was almost like, I'm not even going to shoot the ball. Some of it was Auburn, the way they defended him, like you mentioned. but I would say that he just didn't look confident in going for his shot. Luckily, Isaiah Evans bailed Duke out with six
Heater.
threes in the first half. I felt like they should have like started him in the second half.
Me
I
too.
mean, thankfully they won, but Knueppel at that point he was like what 1 for 2 from the floor until like the last minute of the game. Like he did have a clutch basket and he was able to like drive and score. So one of the things that I wrote about him that now I think is wrong is that I thought he was more than a shooter. However, I still think he is more than a shooter, but it is totally matchup based.
Yep.
Like if they're playing a weaker opponent and they run him off the line, he shows that he can make pull-up jumpers, he can bully guys. We saw a play, I think it was the first game of the year, maybe it was the preseason game where he came down the lane and had the poster dunk. But when he's faced against athletes, that's when he really struggles. And even there were times where I feel like he got to the lane, but he didn't have the launching pad or the quick twitch jump. Like you say, he plays off 2 feet and he ends up getting stuck and then he has to pass it out. And so I think that for him, he's going to need to really play with a high level point guard that can get him open looks. And then maybe he'll find a role in the NBA as like a connective passer because he makes good decisions. I think last time I looked, he has like 24 assists and only 8 turnovers. So he makes good decisions with the ball. He can find flag as the roll man, which is a play I think they should run more often. But I will say this, that he's just been a little disappointing to me, especially against great opponents or high-ranked opponents. But then on the flip side of that, I have to admire Duke for playing these tougher opponents. So if the struggles, you get him out the way early, and then maybe he can figure things out during conference play. But as of now, I don't have him as a lottery pick.
Yeah, we can revisit this down the road, but I think it's important to visit one of the things you said there is he gets stuck, and I think you typically commend players for playing under control and jump stopping. I think he loses advantages by jump stopping because if he were to go up, like you said, with a quick twitch and just go up and attack the rim, he likely gets fouled or scores a lot of these times. Instead, he jump stops and tries to use his strength as the weapon. And because he's 18, he is strong, but he's not stronger than all these Auburn guys. Like that's not going to happen. Whereas you watch a lot of these guys that we talk about bad shot selection, they're super athletic. They just haven't grown into the bodies, and maybe they don't finish at the rim well because they're lanky and slender. He just doesn't get the shot off, and that concerns me. He has to come off 2 and turn around and shoot a jump shot and use his strength as his weapon. And strength as a weapon as a shooter is not something I'm necessarily all that keen on. I think it's a little concerning. But I will say I'd be very, very shocked if his 3-point percentage isn't around 40. Right now it's 35.6, but when he's played the good teams, he went 0-1 last night. He went 0-8 against Kansas, and he went 1-8 against Kentucky. So you do the math on that. That is 1-17. I would be stunned if he's not around 40% because he's going to play a lot of these teams that are better. And you'd be like, well, wouldn't he shoot poorly? No, he's going to shoot better. But I think he's going to shoot better when the guards of Duke find out how they want to play, because right now Foster's not playing well. Proctor's knocking down everything, but they're not having consistent point guard play from Foster or James. And if Isaiah Evans plays and takes some more of that security detail away from Kon as, hey, that's the shooter, like we know we have to guard him, I think he'll get more free and make some more threes. But I just don't see the quick twitch and ability to punish closeouts that I'd hoped for when considering him initially a top 10 prospect.
Yeah. All right, let's switch to Nolan Traore, a guy that I had at number 4, and he's been disappointing. We do have to factor in he is playing against professionals. He's been up and down. He's had some really good performances, and he's had some where he struggled. I think that he's kind of getting exposed a little bit for his predictability. Coming into the season, I knew that he wasn't like a crazy efficient finisher at the rim. I knew he was more so of a shot maker, or maybe more so of a scorer than shooter. And he's just kind of struggled. Like no left hand. If he's going left, he's going to shoot a step back. But he's had some really good flashes, and then he's had some games where he's really struggled. So I want to hear your thoughts on Nolan Traore, the 6'4" point guard from France that a lot of people are saying is the next Tony Parker, the best guard prospect to come out of France in years. I mean, I feel like just a few years ago they were saying that about Killian Hayes. But what are your thoughts on Traore?
I still like Traore. The reason I have him lower is because how high I was on him. I thought there was a chance he was better than Harper and Bailey. I wasn't fully sold in that. I wanted to see Harper and Bailey play college basketball, but like the fact that I had him in the top 4 pretty confidently because of the speed combination, the height, the shooting looked better. There was a game where he scored a ton of points and was hitting step back threes. The way I see him playing is kind of like Andrew Nembhard, but with kind of rocket boosters. Like he's a way faster, really good pick and roll player. But the fact he's not able to go left very well, and if he does go left, like you mentioned, the scouting report's pretty obvious. He's going to step back. I think teams in the NBA can expose players that have question marks like that. You know, if you're taking a guy like he was supposed to be in the top 10 of this draft, much less the top 5, you want a guy who's got very few holes in his game and can expose defenses as opposed to have defenses kind of game plan around his inefficiencies and actually work. So I have my concerns about Nolan Traore in the sense that, yeah, he's fast. Yeah, he can get to the rim. I do think he's a really good passer. The shot is hit or miss. It's a little flash in the pan for me right now. And then if you can't go left, I just have concerns in the longevity of how well they fare or how well he fares and how well that offense will fare when teams really key in on him.
Well, you know, Clyde Drexler and Latrell Sprewell couldn't go left. But
They weren't point guards, though.
Yeah, they weren't point guards. The shooting numbers are bad. 32% from the floor, 25% from 3. The turnovers are concerning, but that's always been the case. He's always been a guy that if he did have high assist numbers, he had high turnover numbers too. So I want to say like at the U18s this summer, he averaged 9 assists per game, but it was like around 4 turnovers per game. I actually talked to an international scout who had been watching him, and he mentioned that one of the areas that needs to be discussed with his struggles is just like their travel, how young he is. And I've been there. I've been to where he's at, and I will say this, and no disrespect to the people in, it's spelled like Saint Quentin, but you know, in France they say it totally different. It is a cold town in the middle of nowhere. It's like a high school atmosphere. The atmosphere of the game was great, but they travel by bus, and I mean it's really, you know, they say it's a challenge. And this particular scout, who's the international scout that knows Europe well, his takeaways were he thinks that they're playing him too many minutes. He thinks that because he's played year round in a sense, he hasn't really had an off season. He thinks he's getting worn down. On top of that is that the travel is absolutely brutal when you're playing a lot of minutes, traveling by bus, and that at such a young age that he thinks that is a factor in some of his struggles. But I don't think the average person would know that. I think it could be a factor, but I will say whether it's a factor or the factor or not, it's pretty safe to say that his stock has kind of taken a hit over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I think he'll have to really pick up the shooting in order to move himself back above the Trey Johnsons, the Yegor Demons that he came in ahead of during the year by most accounts.
Yep. All right, up next, we're going to talk about Tyon Grant Foster, one of my favorite players coming into the draft, and he has had difficulties sustaining the buzz that he had last season, especially after the big game against Arkansas in the NCAA tournament. But before we get into the last and final segment, let's talk about FanDuel. And you can tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, which is America's #1 sports book right now. If you're a new customer, you can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets. If you win, the FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and it is all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more. And it is on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports book partner of the NFL. All right, last segment. Tyon Grant Foster. This pains me. The floor is yours, and I'll share my thoughts.
Well, I think the biggest thing to note about Tyon Grant Foster is the age. And you typically would associate, like age, we're going to be anti the guy no matter how productive. But in this case, it was last year, he was still fairly new to college basketball because of all the injuries, all the hardship, and he dominated. So you expected this year to be even better, and it would be, hey, this guy is too hard to ignore because the statistics are unbelievable. He has the athleticism. He's forcing the issue. You hope he improves his jump shot. Well, none of the above has happened. He's shooting poorly. He's not scoring that many. And I know he missed the first 2-3 games of the season, but he's just not the same twitchy player that we saw last year that would get into the paint at will no matter the competition and could look like he'd win you a game against Alabama. Like Grand Canyon played Alabama on Alabama's Final Four run, and there was a moment where I was like, wow, like they might win this game because he might be the best player on this floor.
They only won because he ran out of gas, in my opinion.
I agree with that. And right now, I'm not even sure he's been the best player on their team.
Jacoby Cole.
Jacoby Coles has been good, and Duke Brennan's been out, and he's been more effective. I don't think he's better. I'm just saying in terms of efficiency, he's been more effective. And you watch them play, and he looks like, that's an athletic guy that's playing at a mid-major. Like that's, you're not necessarily thinking, wow, that's an actual NBA guy. And that concerns me considering he's older, and the age doesn't matter to me typically, but it does in this case when you should be dominating after that many years of being mature, after having your body get stronger, knowing how to play against this competition. It looks like he's taking a step backwards.
Yeah, I mean, he'll be 25 on draft night, and the numbers outside of like the efficiency and the scoring is down 3 points per game. The steals are up to 2.2. He's averaging 1.6 blocks a game. You'll take that from a wing. The 7 rebounds per game, you'll take that. But he is down to 22% from 3, 38% from the floor. He's still getting to the foul line at a good volume, but he definitely has to not only put up good, like I was trying to decide I was going to say good or great numbers, so I ended up saying good, but he's going to have to put up like dominant numbers because of his age. Like at 25, if you average 20 a game, you're supposed to. I think for him, in order to be drafted, he's probably going to have to average 25 a game. And right now, he's not doing himself any favors. He already has a lot of question marks coming in as far as his age, the whole health issues. But I think the only way to offset them is to have an even more dominant season than he had last year. And so far, I mean, he's not close.
Yeah, and I mean, more dominant than last year was always going to be hard, but maybe he'd have a more efficient, less volume type of year, and the team gets better around him. And you say, well, okay, that team's good. They win a game or two in Madness, and now that's the only way for me. Like if they have to make a run in March Madness, and they've already lost a few games that they probably shouldn't have, so it's still very possible because they can win the WAC. But I have my concerns because he already wasn't a very good shooter, and athleticism doesn't age as nicely as shooting ability does. Mm-hmm. And he's already not necessarily dominating. He's fitting in. And, I said this about VJ Edgecombe at the top of the episode. Like, you don't want to blend in. You don't want to be a chameleon. Sometimes that's using a positive light. Like no matter what team this guy's on, he fits in. He's a chameleon. He blends in. No, when you're a prospect in collegiate basketball, you do not want to be a chameleon. You do not want to blend in. You want to stand out. Yeah. And yes, I know who he is, and he makes an impact every game. But he's blending in far more than he did last year when he stood out and was a star.
I will say this much. I say two things. The assist numbers are up. Then one of the knocks on him was that he doesn't pass. And I remember he didn't get his first assist, I feel like, until the third or fourth game of the season last year. The assists are up to 3 points, the 3 assists per game. I will say this, though. Out of all the players on this list, I think he has the best chance to turn it around as far as statistically. I don't know how much is going to help him as far as his draft stock because he's so much older than the other players on this list. But I do think that at the end of the season, he is going to be closer to the numbers that he had last year, which, of course, the three guys previous. I mean, I guess with Traore, you can compare his numbers to last year, but with Edgecombe and Knueppel, they're freshmen. But I think I think he's going to end up around 21, 22 points per game. I think he's going to end up around 35 or 36% from three. The question is it going to be good enough to get him drafted with the concerns about his age and health and so on? But I'm still a believer. Edgecombe, I don't know. I don't buy the shooting. And I don't know if he has, unless he's scoring a lot in transition, I don't know like how he's going to like play much better. I mean, I think I'm trying to figure out how I'm saying it. I think he is going to play better as the season goes on, but I don't think the jump shot is there. I don't think he's going to be able to knock down catch and shoot jumpers or pull up jumpers. I think in order for him to like regain his stock, he's going to have to be like this crazy aggressive slasher that is just putting tremendous pressure on the rim. I don't know if he has the handle to do that. And then as far as Kon, I think the percentage is going to go up. However, if it's a point where Isaiah Evans starts to dig into his minutes, I think that could end up being an issue. And you mentioned it. You thought Isaiah Evans was the better NBA prospect, and now he may have an opportunity to show it. And then as far as Traore, I think it's going to be up and down for him. I mean, consistency is not something we're used to seeing out of young international players playing at 18 years old on a professional level. So I think he is going to be inconsistent. And for him, I just think the flashes have to like be dynamic. And if he can cut down on the turnovers and show a little bit more diversity in his skill set, then I think he could end up right back where, at least in the area where people had him coming into the season.
I agree. I think the guy who's got the most correctable issue is Kon shooting better, but I don't think you can teach the quick twitch. Like, I'm more concerned about his inability to punish the gravity he has. But the guy who I think stock can be most easily remedied is Traore. All he has to do is shoot a little bit better, give people belief. Like, we can talk about a guard each year who has size and who has just some deficiency. But like last year, Nikola Topic shot 88% from the free throw line. He's a bad 3-point shooter. It's flat. And he went 12th despite being out for the first year. Like, you can easily talk yourself into a speedy guard who's got good size, who's played professional basketball for a couple of years, has dominated against his own age group at times, scoring 40 plus in multiple big notable games. I think Traore is the one who can remedy his stock most easily. And Edgecombe, I think, has a heck of a task to try to do so. Kon, I just don't think he can teach the quick twitch. And Tyon Grant-Foster, it's just age is now really working against him as opposed to just kind of working against him the last year.
Yeah. Now, I think it was really working against him last year. Now I think it's really, really, really working against him. But yeah, as far as Knueppel, one of the things I would do is I would try to use his strength to my advantage. So maybe run some plays for him where he gets the ball against a smaller guard in the mid post. I think he can score. He looks comfortable playing through physicality in scoring as far as like from the mid-range, mid-post. Not every play, but then I also think that if he is able to punish a smaller guard, he's a good enough passer to where he can make you pay. And that's the thing about college basketball. Unlike the NBA, you're always going to find a team outside of Duke that has a really small guard on the floor. And if you can find that mismatch, then I think you can, you can make teams pay. Because think about it. Every team has a 6-foot, 160-pound guard on their team somewhere on the floor. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast. Once again, thank you for making this your first listen of the day, or in this case, your second listen of the day. Check out the Locked On newsletter. Visit lockedondaily.com, where your favorite Locked On NBA team podcast now has a newsletter, which will be delivered right to your inbox. Once again, it's Rafael, Barlowe, and Leif Thulin, and we are out of here.